every news channel in America and around the world. So I'll keep this brief and then turn it over to Greg and Chev for digging into a little more detail on what this all means. So obviously, it seems pretty clear the election results. As Jennifer said, the president is not willing to concede. But he's clearly playing a political game. The numbers are just not there for him. In order to overcome the electoral difference, the vote difference that we're looking at now, he would have to be able to magically uncover and be able to present evidence of the greatest fraud election scheme in the history of the United States. That's just not going to happen. So the presidency belongs to Vice President, now President-elect Biden. He's begun putting his transition team together already, I think trying to do his best to ignore the political theater that the president is trying to create. And he seems very purposeful and thoughtful about that. I think we'll go into it perhaps with Greg and Chev, but the agency review teams, which are the transition teams that are going to move into the agencies, have been established. I think, Greg, you're going to go into that a little bit. So that's where we are in terms of the executive and the effort to establish a new set of policies beginning on January 20th. Chev is going to talk a little bit about the fact that there's still time left in the current presidential term and what we can expect from the president, along with the current political show that he's putting on. What kinds of policy expectations and changes might he try to accomplish between now and January 20th? And then that all begs the question of, when we get on the other side of January 20th, what kinds of prospects are we going to have? And that's going to depend a lot on two things. One, how much of a stranglehold will the president continue to have over the Republican Party and over the politics writ large, and in particular the politics of immigration? I think that's what we'll be looking to see. That'll be the real impact of the current presidential election, is the Donald Trump's efforts to remain relevant after January 20th. He will definitely be an influential force on the Congress and what's possible legislatively. And given his numbers, the level of support that existed for Donald Trump in the Republican Party, we can expect him to continue to play a very disruptive role in the next term. For how long? It'll be the question all of us are going to be asking ourselves. And on what Congress? Right now, now that Cal Cunningham has conceded in North Carolina, although that race is not being called officially yet, that Cal Cunningham conceded. It looks like then Tom Tillis will win that reelection in North Carolina. That puts the count at 49 Republican seats to 48 Democratic seats in the Senate. All eyes will be on the two runoffs. Incumbent Kelly Loeffler, who is taking over for Johnny Isakson, so that's a special election to fill his seat. She is being opposed by Raphael Warnock, who is the pastor at Martin Luther King Jr.'s old church, very influential, well-known figure in Atlanta and beyond, or excuse me, Georgia and beyond. The other contest is David Perdue, the sitting senator in Georgia now, against Jon Ossoff. It was a very close race. He just fell below the 50% threshold that Georgia requires for a winner. So we've got two runoffs in the same state. That will be, the Democrats have to win them both to tie in the Senate, and then obviously the vice president would break that tie. The Republicans really only need to win one to maintain control. They'll get to 50 and the Democrats won't be able. They'll get to 51 and Democrats won't be able to break that stranglehold. So that will define sort of what the politics and what's possible from a legislative perspective. So all eyes will be on Georgia in these next couple of months. So that's sort of the realm of what's known and what's knowable in the playing field. Again, I think the real question that we really need to focus on for now, as that political theater and political reality plays itself out, is what can we do in influencing the transition? What is the transition going to look like? And what can we expect from the president between now and January 20th?
Well, let's focus on the happier subject of the transition first, and turn to Greg a little bit about what is Ayla doing? What can we all be doing to assist with the transition? What do we hope it will look like for Ayla and for our clients and our members?
So thanks so much, Jennifer. It's great to be here with all of you, and welcome to the webinar. As Ben was describing before, the fact that we now have some clarity in the White House certainly means that with respect to the opportunity for executive action on immigration reform, that's where most of the opportunity lies. The fact is that the executive branch has really been the main branch to influence in an outsized proportion the policies and the implementation of our immigration system. Certainly, President Trump has done that to incredible effect, forceful effect in the past 4 years. But in fact, that's been the case for many years now because Congress simply hasn't been able to act effectively. And as Ben was describing, the Senate result and the Congress is just still murky at best. But it's unlikely that the Democrats will have a strong majority in both chambers. So in terms of what comes next, that's why Ayla and that's why immigration policy experts are really focused on what the incoming President-elect Biden and his Vice President Kamala Harris have an opportunity to make enormous reforms there. The immediate steps, as Ben was starting to describe there, is that Biden has already announced certain aspects of what is called the transition team. And the transition team is basically the team that goes to work between now and January 20th. Many of these people are essentially volunteers because they are the new administration has not come into office yet. But if you go to the buildbackbetter.com website, that is the Biden transition team website, you'll see listed a lot of information. What they have posted currently is certain things called agency review teams. And those are the public-facing teams that will dive into each of the various agencies, of which there are several that deal with immigration, Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security, Labor, State. And those teams will be the ones that essentially gather as much information as they can, both from the public but also from the current administration, to put together very quick recommendations, a lot of which is based on past work from the campaign. And then that gets channeled into a very quick action plan for January 20th when the president actually comes to office. Immediately upon taking office, what we will see is agency heads, hopefully the key agencies that matter to us, especially DHS, should come into office or be named very soon, possibly within the first week. Possibly the same for the Attorney General appointment and State Department are all likely ones that would get appointed very early. Confirmation is, of course, more of a question. It'll depend upon the Senate makeup and who those candidates are. The first 100 days will be a mad rush to get those personnel, including the leadership and not only the cabinet level officials, but then the high level folks into place, and then other high-level appointees, hopefully soon thereafter. Without those personnel appointments, all of our ideas, there's just no people, no hands to make them happen. And because President Trump has done so much to actually change the makeup of who is in those agencies, there won't be a lot of a team to make those things happen until that personnel happens. So Ayla's effort right now in coming into this transition period is to do as much as we can to educate that team, as well as other influencers, meaning Congress, the voices in Congress that are asking for things, and other policy actors in this field, meaning folks that are our coalition partners that we work widely with, so that they will talk about things and understand the things that need to get done. And then once the administration comes into place, we will, on January 20th, hope to meet with many of the agency officials and really get the machinery going to hopefully make changes happen and get the systems that have really been so dramatically altered in the past 4 years back on track and more in alignment with the kinds of policies that Ayla thinks makes sense. I'll pass it over to Chev in just a moment to talk about Trump and what he's going to do. But I'll just say right now that the Biden team has already signaled some top-level things, policies that they plan to do, If you haven't gone on to their campaign website, I recommend that you do it. It's Biden.com. They have a comprehensive page of reforms on just immigration. I dare say it's probably the most comprehensive reforms in immigration that any president has had before coming to office. They've already said they will reinstate DACA, that they will rescind the Muslim ban, that they'll institute a moratorium on removals until they can set clear removal priorities, that they'll stop family separation. Those are just some of the top level ones that have been talked about more, but it's quite comprehensive. So I'll stop there.
Thanks, Greg. And so that's the hopeful piece of what a transition looks like, that we can kind of use to sustain us through the next 69 days and change. But Sheb, what about what the president might get up to between now and the end of his administration? We know he's already been up to some rulemaking mischief. What more do you think might occur between now and January 20th that could attempt to derail some of the efforts that the incoming administration might be anticipating?
Thank you, Jennifer. I really hate to be the one who has to be the bearer of bad news. I feel like that's like the role I get to play all the time. But yeah, like I think we've seen in the past, outgoing administrations always are attempting to finalize priorities and put up to finish what they had set out to do. So it's not unusual to see last minute flurry of regulations or policies being issued. If you remember, at the end of the George W. Bush administration, we saw a number of interim final regs thrown at us, such as the H-2B regs, STEM OPT. And similarly, at the end of the Obama administration, they were issuing regulations up until the last day. One thing with they're able to issue regulations or policies before they leave office, of course, it makes it harder for the new administration to undo those. And so part of the goal in the last 69 days, as Jennifer said, for the administration is to make it more difficult for the incoming administration to do their job. So, there are a number of things that we're expecting to happen or that we can try to think that'll happen. For example, the presidential proclamations for the NIV and IV bans, they're currently set to expire on December 31st. It's very likely that they will extend those beyond that because it'll put President-elect Biden in a difficult situation and having to rescind those affirmatively. Regarding some of the regulatory efforts that Jennifer mentioned, just to put it into context for everyone, what do you need to do? There's 69, 70 days left. What do they need to do? What can they accomplish in such a short period? In order to finalize rulemaking, normally an agency must review and analyze and respond to all the unique comments that they've received. Then they make decisions on the final policy choices and draft a final rule. Then those rules go through not only agency level clearance, but department level clearance, and then typically would go to, OMB, there's Office of Regulatory Affairs, to do a final rule. That process usually takes months, if not years, to finalize. However, we have seen this administration take a lot of shortcuts already in finalizing regs, taking shortcuts around the rulemaking process, and I think we should expect to see more of that coming. So when I talk about what rules are at final stages of review, the last stage before they get published are when they're pending review at the OIRA, which is the Office of Regulatory Affairs. So there are about 3 or 4 rules of particular interest that are there at that stage that are getting ready to be issued as final rules. There's a special immigrant juveniles petitions final rule. There are 2 asylum-related rules. One final rule related to the security bars and processing due to COVID, and then another which is a wholesale asylum rule that changes the procedures for asylum and withholding. And then there is an EOIR rule, appellate procedures and rule that just went to OIRA today for final review. So, those are ones that are very likely to get finalized in time. Then you have the regulations where the comment periods they've been issued as proposed rules. The comment period has closed, and now the agencies are working to finalize that. And what will really be dependent on whether or not they can accomplish it is how many comments they received, to sort of look at the time frame of it. So there's 4 rules of, I think, particular interest to our membership and to the stakeholder community at large that, the agency is prioritizing in finalizing. So there's the USCIS affidavit of support rule. That one, the comment period closed last week. They only got about 320 comments, so not a huge number of comments, which means it might be easier for them to finalize more quickly. Then there's the US, and my understanding, given, this administration's prioritization of, not having individuals depend on public benefits, that is an important priority for them to finalize, especially given the shakiness of the public charge rule itself. Then there's the USCIS biometrics rule, which changed what kind of data and personal identifying information that has to be submitted, that it can be captured, and at what instances. That rule actually got about 5,300 comments, so it's a lot. It might be a difficult rule to finalize, but it's also one we're keeping an eye on. There is an EOIR representation rule that only got about 40 comments, but many of them are very technical, so that's another one to be keeping an eye on that may be finalized. And then finally, I know one that's been a particular concern has been ICE's rule, which seeks to eliminate duration of status for FJ and I non-immigrants. There was an overwhelming response in that rule. They got over 32,000 comments. So it's a priority for the administration for sure, but I think that one will definitely have a tough road ahead of it if they really try to follow the rules and address all the unique comments that they've received. And then it's a little bit harder, but still, if it's a priority, they can make things happen in the final days. Are the ones where the notice of proposed rulemakings have been issued, but they haven't yet. The comment periods haven't closed. And there's one in particular that we're watching. It's the H-1B lottery rule. That comment period closes on December 2nd, which would only give them, I guess, doing math, but about 50 days to finalize. And so it's doable. They can have everything sort of half baked and ready to go and just sort of guess at what the comments are going to be and be ready to answer. But it'll be close. So that's one, and I'll just make a plug for it now. ILA is going to be doing a comment campaign on that rule, and it'll be really important for people to submit the comments because that is what's going to help slow down the wheel. And then the other thing to keep in mind is, for sure, is litigation and our various litigation efforts on these different rules and different policies that are being pushed out. And what does that mean? So, we were scheduled to have litigation on our DOL IFR rule, the DOL prevailing wage rule. If that IFR is set aside by a court, that makes it easier for a new administration to set aside. If it's not, the new administration would have to go through notice and comment rulemaking. So there are a number of rules and policies that are being challenged. Public charge is like a merry-go-round, I think, that we keep going on and off again. There are various asylum rules. So that's also something we need to keep an eye on. What do the agencies and DOJ do in response to that litigation? How are they handling it? That might be an important signal. And, how effectively can we slow down the process, which will allow a next administration to try to take care of it through settlement. So I think that's right now what we're expecting. So there's probably more that we haven't even dreamed of, but that's it for now.
Yeah, there's one thing that we know is to always count on more. never count out the administration. They've always got something else up their sleeve, another bomb to drop before we've recovered from the last one. Thank you, Chev. That was really comprehensive. I think I just want to give a shout out here to AILA and its litigation team for the tremendous work that they've done pushing back against the public charge rule and more recently the Department of Labor's prevailing wage rule. I'm very hopeful we're going to have good news on that soon. These kinds of litigation efforts are incredibly important to all of us, and they help fix more quickly what would otherwise be longer things to unwind in a Biden administration. So just on that point, Chev, can you just briefly, if some of these rules that are not going to be struck down through litigation before the end of this administration do go into effect before Biden takes office, and then the Biden administration wants to walk them back, what does that look like procedurally to rescind a regulation that has been successfully promulgated and that takes effect before Trump leaves office?
Yeah, I mean, if the regulation is published and then it's taken effect, it requires a whole new rulemaking process to go through. They need to issue notice and comment rulemaking to undo it. They need to be able to justify why a new interpretation is necessary. And if you look back to some of the regulations that the Obama administration had issued and that the Trump administration had said that they want to undo, such as the H4EAD rule or OPT, they haven't been able to do it as successfully because it requires a lot of work to be able to do it. So it makes it a lot harder, and it doesn't even matter if the rule hasn't taken effect. Actually can even be more complicated if the rule was just published and it's about to take effect, because an agency will want to slow it down and not take effect, which means they'll have to issue a rule to delay the effective date, and then on top of that, then do a whole new rulemaking. So, it's a lot of work. And so whatever we can do, whether it be our, phenomenal litigation efforts, making sure we send enough comments to slow these efforts down, I think that's really key in the next 70 days.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think it's important for us all to be very clear-eyed about how long this path is going to be to transition from, the horrors that we've been experiencing for the last 4 years back to a sense of normalcy. There are a number of things that can be undone fairly quickly through executive action, and then there's a lot that can't. And I think that's, or that can be undone through executive action, but it's a much slower process, like the rulemaking process. So I think it's important to keep in mind that this is a long road ahead. It's not a short and easy fix, but that doesn't mean there won't be a fix. And at least we have that to look forward to, partnering with an administration that is relatively like-minded in terms of their view of the law and what it should look like. So on that point, Greg, let's turn to you again to talk about what AILA's vision is for this new administration and how we hope to potentially influence immigration policy during the Biden administration. You want to begin with a discussion of our recommendations that we just put out?
Thank you, Jennifer. Yes, and so first of all, let me just refer everybody who's participating here. You should have available to you in the webinar format here the AILA Vision for the Future of Immigration. These were recommendations that we just released yesterday for AILA's vision for what the immigration system can look like to make America a more welcoming nation. Before I go into the details of this document, what I just want to say is that the planning AILA has gone into for the possibility that there would be a new administration in the White House in 2021 actually began in 2019. We began by looking at what resources would be most helpful to the AILA members and to the public about what was happening with the elections. There's a website that web page that we put up on our website providing information about all the candidates. And once that was winnowed down to only 2 candidates with Biden and Trump, we continue to put information on there about how people could engage in the process. One thing that also has begun happening now that once there was only 2 candidates in the race, was it became clear that we wanted to share information with the Democratic National Committee and other influential entities to help shape what a new administration's platform would look like. So AILA did quite a bit of policy development during that time. And now, since the elections have passed, and we have at least a clear winner, even though that remains contested by President Trump, the transition team, as I mentioned, is up. And we have published these recommendations that you now have before you that are public recommendations to the Biden administration that's incoming of what we'd like to see them accomplish during their time in office. I should note that these recommendations were developed in collaboration with the national AILA committees that have conducted liaison regularly with all of the agencies. Those committees are really the repository of so much of our leadership and expertise on all the different issues and the agencies that work on immigration. All of those committees are listed at the back, so you see them as a resource. And in addition, we work with our leadership to determine what are the priorities for AILA in terms of a platform. And that's how you now have before you a document that has 12 different major sections and set forth a broad brushstroke of what needs to be done by administration. It's much more focused on executive branch actions that can be taken. There's some reference to what can be done legislatively, but it's really an action plan for the president and the White House. The aspects that we emphasize very much are tailored to the concerns of our members in their practices and to what you are seeing daily, be it at the border, in the immigration courts, or in your practice applying for benefits with USCIS or other agencies. So that's how the document was formed. We have many top-level recommendations. They cannot, however, encompass the whole of all the policies that AILA has been advancing and that AILA members are concerned about. This is meant to be, in a sense, a teaser to tell the agency officials that will be coming in and the current transition team what areas AILA has expertise in, so that they can say, oh, with respect to USCIS or the courts, these are areas that AILA knows well, and these are the areas it has expertise in. So it's meant as a menu of items that gives an opportunity for the administration to then come work with us more and work with our committees and our members who have expertise. So that's the document you have before you, and I'm going to turn it back over to Jennifer.
Okay, thanks, Greg. For those of you who haven't yet read that document, I really encourage you to do it. It's available on the website, and there's a whole social media toolkit that you can use to publicize that document to your networks and to those you know, to get the word out about what AILA's objectives are in assisting the Biden administration in the transition, and what we hope their initial top line priorities will be. Again, from a 10,000 foot view, it's not intended to be a comprehensive list of everything we hope the Biden administration will accomplish, but it's a broad thematic document that is designed to kind of convey what our overall priorities are. And I think it's really well done. It's a good piece, and it's a good piece to share with not just the Biden administration, but with anybody who's interested in immigration and immigration advocacy. So we encourage you to do that. And we definitely want to thank the various AILA volunteers who formed the committees that helped to write that document and produce it. And so speaking of some of those top line priorities, there's more light. Speaking of some of the top line priorities, with regard to legal immigration, let's talk about that first, the legal immigration priorities and goals that we would like to see advanced under this administration. Shev, do you want to walk us through sort of what our mainline priorities are in that area?
Yeah, and I think I'm having some technical difficulties. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me? Okay. I think You probably can't see me though, right? At this point, I don't know what happened. My computer froze in the middle of it. Yes. So talking about some of the top line priorities are things that like will sound very familiar to AILA members. They're calls that we have been making throughout the past 4 years. One of the biggest ones, of course, is USCIS accountability issues. Getting the system back on track and back on time. We're all familiar with all the ridiculous case processing delays. And so what we want this administration to prioritize is getting USCIS to become a more efficient agency and to hold it accountable. And part of that is by reversing some of the policies that have, made it so much more difficult for them to be efficient, like eliminating the deference policy. We call them to reinstate the deference policy. We call them to eliminate the mandatory interview requirements. We want to make sure the adjudication that it's consistent with law, and stopping ridiculous policies like the no blank space policy. In addition, you want to make sure that USCIS returns to its statutory mission of efficiently adjudicating immigration benefits and not turning into a third enforcement agency. Their goal and their statutory purpose is very different than ICE and CBP, and then they should go back to that. And so we call the administration to look at the notice to appear, the NTA memos, and restore opportunities for individuals to be able to integrate and naturalize. In addition, and I think this is particularly important to AILA, is restoring USCIS's commitment to customer service, reopening liaison channels, having robust stakeholder engagement, making sure customer service is an important mission for the agency. And finally, really with USCIS is making sure that the system is accessible to all. So making sure that the fee rule, which is currently enjoined, is reissued in a way that people can afford to apply for lawful benefits, rescinding the public charge regulations, which is one of the priorities of the Biden administration. And then looking just to improve upon many of the, employment-based, family-based policies that have happened, restoring integrity into those policies, with it being, at all the agencies, DOL, DHS, State Department, making sure that there's efficiency in providing work authorization and verification, assisting individuals who are stuck in the immigrant visa backlog, but through different measures which we outline in the recommendations, and promoting fair wages not only for foreign workers but U.S. workers, which has been a big push even of the Trump administration at late. But they have missed the fair for both parts, for both the foreign workers and U.S. workers. And so these are some of the priorities. I don't want to get into too much detail, but we want to make sure that all these agencies are working in a way to ensure efficient and fair adjudications, because the delay in people's cases getting processed impacts their lives and their livelihoods and their families. And that is sort of one of the big themes we have in this recommendation.
Yeah, I think fairness is really key. Fairness and open communications, and all that means. It means public engagement. It means saner processing times. It means rolling back the policies that have hampered adjudications and contributed to the culture of no that we've been seeing for the last 4 years, with a baseline presumption of fraud. And I think that the recommendations that we have made, if followed, would help us to move closer to all of that level of fairness and openness and communication that we hope for from USCIS and the other immigration agencies that enforce our legal immigration system. So on the other side of the ledger, Greg, what about those seeking asylum? What about border protection? What about those going through deportation and removal proceedings and the immigration courts, enforcement? What do we hope all of that looks like under the Biden administration?
Well, we do hope with a snap of the fingers that those can all be changed with a wave of a wand. The one thing that I forgot to mention in terms of waving a wand is we emphasize very much at the beginning of this document the importance of the incoming President Biden to send a powerful, forceful message early on in his administration that the tenor of how the immigration system is going to operate will be dramatically different. He's already done that in his campaign statements. He's already talked about the principles of the United States as a country, as a welcoming nation, and we are urging him to very much make that message very clear because there has been such a forceful message in the other direction during the past 4 years, and the idea that immigrants could be scapegoated or that immigrants could be excluded or really banned from the country are ones that ALA certainly finds reprehensible, and the administration that's incoming has already set that tone in their campaign documents, and we hope President Biden, once he becomes president, will state that very clearly when he enters office. So in answer, Jennifer, to your question about kind of on the enforcement and removal side of things, we have several sections in our document that highlight these. I'll run through them very quickly. One thing I'll just mention is the immigration court system. Here, the main thing that is just so critical is that the courts need to operate in a manner that is efficient, that is fair, and that restores integrity to the courts because they have been politicized to an extreme level during the past 4 years, both through procedures, in stripping the judges of basic authorities they have, and in essentially packing the BIA, the Board of Immigration Appeals, and the immigration judge ranks with judges that have a very strong prosecutorial bias, or often have never had the kinds of roles as judges and don't have the skills to do that. So that's a first step that we think is critical. Next, turning to one of the hot button issues that has captivated the nation for the past 4 years is what the president has been saying on the border. Reforming the systems at the border and the treatment of migrants as they come to the southern border especially is going to be an absolute priority and imperative for this president to pay attention to. The kinds of reforms that we are recommending, first of all, are to make sure that the screening of any migrant coming up to the United States and the opportunity that that migrant, whether they're seeking asylum or another form of relief, avail them of the fair and meaningful opportunity to seek that relief. That process we think can be done in a way that is both orderly and fair at the same time. And the rhetoric that we've been hearing lately is that that is not possible and it's been an exclusionary practice. We think a fair process can be done that's also orderly. One step in doing that would be to make sure that there are more resources surged to the border to provide adequate asylum screening. And asylum officers not only can do the credible fear proceedings, but we think they should be authorized to, after doing a credible fear determination, go ahead and to grant actual asylum the way an immigration judge currently needs to do. We think that would be an effective way to truncate the process without compromising due process. Another critical step in that is to guarantee legal assistance and legal counsel. As all of you know, that is not currently provided by the immigration system. The opportunity to have counsel paid for by the government, by those who can't pay, will greatly assist those that are coming in that are being put through the enforcement system, of which only a very, very tiny fraction are represented currently. And that's why they need so much ALA members like you practicing or a government paid for system to supplement that. The other aspect is the detention system that I just want to highlight quickly. Through our immigration justice campaign, our pro bono network operating in many different facilities across the country, we see how the immigration detention system has deleterious impacts, tremendously harmful impacts on people that are typically seeking asylum, families, and there are severe harms now that are being committed, not only because of the long-term conditions that are substandard and truly inhumane, but practices like family separation. And during COVID, we've seen greater harm being done to people because the detention facilities are, in fact, petri dishes where we've seen spikes in COVID. we would like to see detention no longer be a presumptive practice, which has become the case, and that things like alternatives to detention, use of community-based alternatives, be really ramped up so that we no longer see vast taxpayer resources being spent on detention. A couple last points that I'll mention. One is how enforcement is done, and that bleeds into the issue of making sure that enforcement priorities are set that actually are priorities. Many of you may remember that when President Trump first came into office, he basically obliterated the idea of priorities and said everybody should be pursued. Well, that's not effective enforcement. You can't go after everybody effectively when there are going to be people that are going to be higher priority. They should be emphasized. So the idea of setting clear priorities and exercising discretion in cases where there just isn't the finite law enforcement resource to pursue all those cases, that is a more effective strategy. We think at the same time that people who are undocumented, people who are who have received DACA protection, dreamers, that they should have the opportunity to seek and apply for legal status and to have permanent legal status and the opportunity to apply for citizenship after living here for so many years. That's only something that Congress can grant. But President Biden coming in will have the opportunity not only to reinstate DACA, but use other authorities he has, such as TPS or parole in place, other ways of looking at the enforcement issues and the population on which enforcement is going to be focused, and being more clear about those priorities so that certain populations will not be the subject of enforcement, at least not at the initial get-go. I'm going to stop there because we're running out of time, but we certainly recommend that you look at the full document. Even though it doesn't cover all the issues, it should address many of the very clear priorities for the association.
Okay, thank you, Greg. So I think you can see that we put together a very exciting list of wishes for the new administration and the direction that we hope it will head in. And really overarching all of that is the point that we made at the very beginning of that document, which is that it's so incredibly important that we return to being a nation that is welcoming of immigrants and that recognizes the incredible strength and talent they bring to the country, and that moves away from this very harmful rhetoric of the past 4 years that has demonized immigrants and pushed them away and applied our laws in an inhumane and unfair fashion, and in many cases an illegal fashion. So I think that all of these goals are aimed at getting us to that point again, where we are once again a nation that welcomes and embraces immigrants and that celebrates the diversity that makes our country great. So with that, I guess we want to open it up. We have some time remaining, and we'd like to open it up for any questions that any of you might have. I'm going to confess right now that I don't remember how we do that. So I'm hoping that there's a moderator behind me who can let me know how we would turn this over for questions and begin to queue those up. So can someone jump in and explain how that happens? Eunice or someone?
Questions will come through the box. There are none at the moment. So I can say that there was a question. I don't trust myself to have used the technology properly. I believe that there was a question about any reason to believe Biden won't rescind the NIV and the COVID bans on day one. And my response was that, there's every indication. The NIV ban, I think, is a little bit easier. Those things that are explicitly focused on executive orders limiting immigration are clearly a target for the Biden administration. Where the president has used COVID as a pretext to do something related to immigration, may be a little bit more difficult at a minimum. And I'm only speculating on this. I think they're committed to figuring those things out, untangling the immigration piece of it from the COVID piece of it. But they've also appointed this COVID team of medical experts, and I think they're going to want to consult with them. I know that the Biden folks at least on the transition teams, the folks that I know on there, they know the difference between a real COVID response and a pretend excuse to do immigration issues. So I suspect they'll be able to bring the medical experts up to speed on how to unwind the COVID-related issues affecting immigrants and do it in a way that continues to protect us from a medical perspective. But again, that's a complicating factor. The other question I got separately was, what can AILA members do in all of this? And I think, there's two things I think with regard to that. One, when you read this document that the team has put together with the committees, it's a great document, but it is very top line, right? This is about identifying issues that are important and then pushing the administration, working with them to make them priorities. As it becomes clearer which of those priorities the administration is going to take on first, is then when we begin to drill down on the details of particular solutions, and when we will be back to both the committees and to experts within our own community on solutions and details on how to do those things. So I think there's going to be opportunities for more engagement with the AILA community and with our committees as we dig into that transition document. I also think it's important to point out that it's never too late to start building relationships. We talked about the president's ability, the shadow he will cast on the next Congress and on this issue. This is an important time to be reaching out to members of Congress. If you've got a member of Congress who's going to be in the next Congress, who's won their election, then it's never too early to start building relationships with those folks and talking to them about immigration, understanding where they stand, understanding where we have agreement and disagreement, and working, all of us working together to build partners and allies and a real coalition behind sensible immigration reform. So I would highly recommend engagement. You don't have to wait till lobby day to start talking to your members of Congress. You don't even have to wait until they get signed into the new Congress, quite frankly. If you know they're going in, then talk to them now. And lastly, social media, which, of course, I'm an expert in. I'm not an expert in social media, but I think Greg can share a link we've put up on, went out on AILA 8. It's up on AILA.org in the handout section or in the chat section. Provide you a link to that with a list of sample tweets, those kinds of things. So social media is obviously a very powerful tool for responding and pushing both the transition document and a better narrative around immigration. Last thing I'll say is, Biden won the election, but the Democrats lost ground in the House. They didn't win all the seats in the Senate that they want. So that suggests that we have to take serious the fact that 71 million people voted for Donald Trump, and that there are deep divisions in this country that we have to begin to heal, particularly around the issue of immigration. So whether it's on social media or in your community with your conversations with your members of Congress or in your own community, I urge AILA members to be an agent for building bridges. To find common ground with people and to begin to work towards solutions rather than polarization and further division.
Well said, Ben. Yeah, I think getting the word out and being active, it doesn't just have to be through political engagement. It can be through social engagement. It can be through writing an op-ed in your local paper. If you have an interest in that, you can always contact our media team at AILA, and they will help you draft and craft an op-ed to try to place in your local paper, to make connections through media organizations, to get the word out, to tell the truth about immigrants and push back against some of the harmful rhetoric that's been happening over the last 4 years. There are going to be tremendous opportunities to do that now in this space, more than ever, I think. And so now is the time to channel all of that incredible energy that we have coming out of the election and channel it into places where we can really be most effective right now, even before the official transition to the next administration. I don't know if there are any more questions. We did put up the link for, I think Sheb posted the link for for amplifying the social media toolkit and the Biden transition document.
I just resent it. So I think somebody was asking it for going to the Q&A section, so I just posted it back up there as well.
Okay.
There's a question about when do we think consulates will reopen. I think that's the $1 million question about that. I mean, as we're seeing across the world right now, COVID is spiking again. So it doesn't seem like it'll make it any easier for them to reopen quickly in that sense, because they had started a gradual reopening in many of the consulates. But as countries start going back on lockdown, that puts it, will slow down that process. We do continue to monitor that, and AILA, our global migration section, has a great chart that they track that in, and so I would recommend that you keep an eye on that chart to see what the latest is.
Well, there's a lull in the questions here, although we certainly would like to encourage people to use the Q&A system, the chat system, to ask questions. I'll just flag, don't miss the American Immigration Council's upcoming event. It's called An Evening of Virtual Wine and Art. That'll be Thursday, November 12th, coming up from 6 to 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I think we're flashing a slide of that so you can see it, and I'll also put it into the Q&A here so everybody has it. We hope you'll join that fun event. Virtual wine, I wonder what that tastes like.
It's just like whatever you brought.
Good as class.
So, and I think it is a fundraiser as well, a fun emphasis on the fun in the fundraiser. So there'll be wine, and I think there'll be an auctioning off of some items, and the proceeds of that will go to the council, which again, their work has never been more important than it is right now. We encourage you to have some fun and also do what you can to support the council if you're able. Okay. Does anyone else have any of the rest of you guys have anything that we should have touched on that we didn't, or other closing thoughts, since we don't seem to have any more questions at the moment, and we'll give some people some more time. If you do have questions, go ahead and enter them in the Q&A box. Can you discuss the cultural legacy of Trump at USCIS and state and how it can be undone? Oh.
I think Chev can definitely talk about that. I will say though, Chris, that does point out one area that we've been focused on and concerned about, which is to the degree to which not only Trump casts a shadow over the next 4 years, but whether there's an effort to embed certain people within agencies to be a disruptive influence within the agencies. There is some capacity to transition people from political appointees to career people, and that's something that we have to watch and I think arm the Biden administration with information about. But Chev, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that or other ways that they can really poison the well.
Yeah, I think you raise a really good point about people being placed there, but I would also remind people that many of the 20,000 USCIS employees, at least I can speak to them personally, don't like what they've had to do in the last 4 years. And so we do have allies within the agency, and probably allies that we'll be able to more freely talk with in the new administration, where doors have been closed in the past. And, in addition, what our priorities for USCIS, part of that was focused on that cultural shift, going back to its mission, revising the antics that this administration pulled in the sense of, taking the word customer out of its customer service, going away from being an immigration granting benefit to a vetting agency. So, part of the focus will be on resetting the mindset in these agencies that, this is a welcoming nation. And I think that's where we start out our recommendations that, we want this administration to set the tone for all of these agencies from the beginning, why, immigrants are welcome and continue to be welcome in this country.
And I think it's also true, and maybe Chev and Greg can comment on this more, but in a number of agencies, and I think particularly within the State Department, there were a number of people who were opposed to what the Trump administration was doing, who simply left or were fired. career employees and a lot of those positions were never filled during the Trump administration after they were vacated. So these are positions that can now be filled with people who are in support of what the Biden administration's agenda is. So I think there's reason to hope there that some of these positions that have been unstaffed will now be filled with people who don't necessarily have the Trump culture or philosophy, but who had left and are now going to return. So that's a reason for hope there.
I'm noticing another question that Carol King had posted a little while ago about the National Association of Immigration Judges, the NAIJ. And the question is about NAIJ has served as an important voice, not only as the union of the immigration judges, but also as a public voice to provide a window into what the immigration judges' views are. Recently, there's been an effort by the administration to decertify the NAIJ. That was initially rejected by the Federal Labor Relations Authority, I think is what the FLA stands for. But unfortunately, a most recent decision that came out about 2 weeks ago is that they have approved the decertification effort. I'm not sure yet what the next litigation step might be for the NAIJ in that. If that gets finalized, that would be a real problem, I think, for both the judges, the lack of any collective bargaining voice any longer for them, as well as for the opportunity to have engagement and representation for them. I will use this issue as just a moment to kind of explain how the NAIJ being decertified is just one example of the many ways this administration has stripped the judges of the necessary authorities they have to even do their jobs properly. And with respect to the culture change that we were talking about before with the previous question, currently about near 283 to 300 of the current sitting immigration judges are Trump appointees. And we think many more will be rushed in the next couple of months because that's been their goal to really pack it. That's out of 520 current judges. So Trump has appointed the majority of immigration judges. One thing that we are certainly calling for, and we know there is a GAO investigation being done into the politicization of the immigration court that was called for by the Senate. That's due specifically to COVID, but we hope they will look broadly at the politicization of the hiring processes and many inappropriate, improper considerations put into the hiring process.
Thank you, Greg. All important points. Yeah, I know that, and Carol's pointing out that NALJ is asking for reconsideration, and we know that, and that, obviously under a different administration, we may have a different outcome on that decision with regard to the judges union, I would expect. All right, well, we are at the top of the hour. I want to thank all of you for being here. This is an extremely exciting and hopeful time for us all. It's also a very stressful time for us all, but we are so incredibly grateful for all of the hard work of the AILA National staff that they are doing under tremendous strain every day to try to survive this administration and put us on our best possible footing as we move into the future with the Biden administration. I want to thank all of you members who are out there killing it for your clients every day, getting up every morning in incredibly overwhelming times and doing your very best to serve your clients and make us all better. So thank you all for all of the work that you do. Thank you for being here today. Let's move forward into the future with hope, because tomorrow is going to be much brighter. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for your leadership, Jennifer.